All right, let's run down through the course requirements here quickly. This class looks at the biblical and political theories behind the Constitution. It's U.S. Constitution. Hopefully that was not especially shocking to you that we're going to look at it. The entire text, and hopefully that sends tingles of excitement through your body, of the Constitution is examined and discussed, not just read. We'll talk about it. Is that a cough drop? You reduced eating candy already? So, if you can get your hands on something like this, that'd be handy. I think it's in our one textbook, a copy of it. But we'll read the whole thing and talk about it. And hopefully you end the year extremely frustrated. Because it's really clear what the thing says. And then it really makes you scratch your head when you read what the Supreme Court ruled about Obamacare, or what the president says, or what it's very, very clear. And they're intentionally lying and misinterpreting it. So we will read the whole thing and discuss it. And as we go through different parts of it, we'll read what it actually says, and then in a lot of cases talk about how it's been twisted and changed, and sometimes some Supreme Court rulings that bear on that particular case. So. All right, our text. There's 4 of them. This one right here, a familiar exposition of the Constitution of the United States, written 1840s, I forget the exact year. It was meant to be read just by the common man, and it explains what the Constitution says. So, it's not. It doesn't get real deep into the weeds and technicalities. It'll list the different parts of the Constitution. Say this is what this is teaching us. This is what it's saying. So now don't get worried about the fact that it's long and think, how can it just kind of skim the surface? But it's not written in deep technical language at all. It's actually a very famous book. Anybody ever heard of Joseph's story? He's the author. Not the story of Joseph. Joseph's story? Okay. If you ever get a chance to read, political writings about the Constitution, they'll often say story comments or something referring back to this book. It's referenced relatively frequently by people talking about the Constitution. So we'll read that thing. The first part under outside work is that there'll be daily quizzes from the assignments from this book by story. And if you flip to the back side of your page, you'll see those quizzes. They're 5-question quizzes for the most part. Number 5 is, did you read? That's worth 60 points. The other 4 questions are 10 points each. So if you read and get half the questions right by guessing, then you're up to an 80. Hopefully don't have to guess too much. So I really don't intend these to be something that you have to read, twice a day for the entire week beforehand, and make a study guide and get with your friends in the dorm for 3 hours. And I don't intend that. I want you to be able to read them with your brain engaged, and then hopefully do further well in the quizzes. But to help with that, I started doing the 60 points for reading, and then the other 40 is split up amongst the 4 questions. So. Questions about that? You might want to notice the first quiz. Today's the 8th, Friday. Get started right away with the fun one. All right, there's a little asterisk there under outside work. Any chapters that are not read for quizzes may be read and outlined for extra quiz grades. We start with chapter 8. And if as we go through, you'll see we skip some chapters here and there. Try to pick out the ones that are the more crucial ones for us. But if you read the other ones, read an outline. Then, unless you give me an outline, that sounds like it's from the Sunday Comics, and you claim it's from this chapter. As long as the outline matches at all the chapter, and you say you read it, I'll give you 100 on it. So it'll typically be 100. So, Devontae?
For those kinds of quizzes, do they gotta be with the time with the I guess what I'm asking is, the quiz is not assigned. I mean, can you do it like anytime? Anytime up till the end of the semester.
Yeah. So if halfway through the semester you see you got an 80 quiz average, and you want to pull that up, you can do some of those. Yeah.
When you say outline, what do you mean by that?
Just like a half page, just outline of
like a CE, outline like 3 main points of Spurgeon.
Well, more than the 3 main points,
Okay.
but half a page should be sufficient.
Okay.
You know, that's something along that line. It doesn't have to be super deep. So, okay. I don't usually have tons of people do that, but I usually have some. A couple years I've had people do just about every extra chapter in there. That's weird. Now notice who's making the comment. The heathen in the room that doesn't want to pray, telling us we're weird. So, all right, so that's one. You'll want a copy of this thing. Let's see, the next textbook, The Free Citizen. This book, you just have to read this one. It's the third part of the outside work. Each student read the 2 books. The Free Citizen, due October the 6th. And then the other book I went to grab this morning, and I don't know what I did with it, Betrayed by the Bench. It's a small book. It's not real big, written by Joseph Stormer. If you've been around here a while, he's come and preached at our church before. He's a very old man now, but it's written by him. Betrayed by the Bench. Talking about the Supreme Court. I have that one due November the 20th, towards the end of the semester. And I intentionally do that because I think it would be helpful for you to have read some of the Constitution, and then he'll reference those. You can read it without knowing anything about the Constitution, and he'll explain it. But I thought it might be more useful to you having read some of the Constitution. So I don't normally encourage you to procrastinate, but that might be one to put off and do closer to the time because you'll have a little better understanding, I think. So, okay, and those you just have to read. I'm just going to send a paper around in class, and you'll say you read, you didn't read, and it's all or nothing. You know, it's not, you don't tell me the percentage that you read, 95%, just yes or no for those. So, questions on that? All right, the last one of our course requirements is the Fellow's Papers. This book was intended for the average Joe, you know, not deep technical language. This also is intended for the average Joe, but it is not light reading. Right? These are actually published in the newspaper. They were articles and essays trying to defend the Constitution at the time of the decision whether or not it would be adopted. So they were published in the newspaper for people to read. If you ever think, man, we're so advanced in our age, just imagine picking up the Sunday paper and finding one of these in it. All right, they're not light reading. All right, not light reading. And you have to answer a bunch of questions from them. Part 2 of the outside work, each student will read the assigned chapters from the Fellow's Papers and answer the accompanying questions. All right, these questions. This is something I strongly encourage you not to put off till the night before. There are quite a few chapters we don't read, and those are the ones that you can, if you want to read those and outline them for an extra quiz grade. You might find story easier to read if you're wanting extra quiz grades. So there's a lot of the first part of the book is really just making the case about why we should have one united country as opposed to splitting up into a couple different countries. It doesn't particularly address the Constitution as much as it does forming one country following the American Revolution. So some of those chapters we don't especially read and look at. Anybody ever read much of the Fellow's Papers? Anybody read any? Josh has? Enjoyable?
Some of them.
Some of them? Not fun at all?
John Jay is hard to read.
John Jay. So they are, what's the right word? Academic? Educational. So, oh well. But we're here to learn about the Constitution. And it was written by people, many of them, Madison especially, who was the father of the Constitution. And he's explaining what it says. And gives a lot of their thinking behind why certain things were made certain ways and why it was worded certain ways and not another way. So, very, very useful. So, and that's why we read and answer questions as opposed to just reading this thing. So it's an extremely good book. I did years ago used to do this with my high school class. So these are just high school level questions. So, they complained about them a little bit, but so. All right, questions about that? Yes?
When I look at the first one, it's got questions. That means we don't have to outline it. Just do the questions. Or you have to outline it and do the questions?
Oh, just the questions. I mean, yeah, number 1 just has the 6 questions. Then number 2, it says make a general outline. That is, do that for number 2, yeah. You don't have to outline all of them. But you'll see we do 1, 2, 3, and then we skip to 47. So. Yes?
So this is the only work we have to do for the Federalist Papers? I heard the stories about the Federalist paperwork.
Exciting, and you're just all summer saying, oh, I can't wait. It's glorious. No, that's it. I don't know if that it is sufficient to describe what it is, but just those 2 sheets of paper. So, if you have trouble sleeping at night, it works very good for that too. Just pull that thing out and start looking at it. So, I enjoy reading them, but I have to have my brain engaged. You can't just read it and not really focus. You know, like you're doing a devotion, you just look at all the words and get the chapter done. You have to actually be thinking about what it says, or you'll be lost completely.
It's like
So.
educational manual.
Yes. It'll do it. All right, the last thing for outside work, education students. Anybody education major, you get the special practicum requirement stuff. So. All right, grading is right below there. The tests are 40%, quiz is 30%, the fellowship paper is 10%, and the outside reading 20%. So if you just think, well, I'm not going to do it, you can still get a 90. Please don't do that. That would hurt. So. All right, if you flip the page back over to the quizzes, I think everything matches up here. We should have the free citizen due on the day that it's assigned on the front, I hope, October the 6th. Hopefully they all match up. Anyway, this is all our quizzes. It's useful for me also to throw in when the other assignments are due. And also I have in there the tests. The first test on the 2nd is a few days, class periods earlier than usual. I'm going to be gone that day, so we're pretty much locked into that test day. The other one, if we need to, we might bump it a day or two, but this is what I'm shooting for. So. It doesn't look too bad if you just have this. And it's every class period right there. So, yes?
Are the tests cumulative?
Only the final. Okay. And if you've had me in American history, it works the same way. The final, I can ask any question that was on a previous test. So that would be... I try to pick out the important things and put them on the test, and rather have you dig through and study all the minutia that doesn't count. Study those things, right? Hopefully we learn the important stuff. So. All right, a little junk on the podium. All right, questions at all about the requirements? All right, I do want to cover just a little bit today to kind of get us started. I wasn't planning a full day of lecturing regardless, but definitely now. Anybody in here next hour again? All right. There's a water fountain. Wow. Sorry. Well, hopefully I have time to maybe run down to the walk-in freezer for a few minutes and then come back up. So, all right, today I just want to do a little bit of introductory stuff, look at a definition, look up a little bit at the Bible, what it says about government, just a little bit of an introduction. Friday, we will dig into the background to the Constitution, the historical background, really. Looking at where some of the ideas developed through history. But we'll start that on Friday after your first 100% grade. I mean, that will be your whole average for the semester, that one quiz on Friday. So you can do well on the quiz and then email that home quickly to your parents and say, Mom, look, I'm getting 100 thus far. So, all right, let me give you a definition of government. I didn't create this definition. It sounds kind of highfalutin, but I think it covers the topic. Definition of government. It's the flow of force and power from God. There's more to it, but lots of times when people talk about government, they talk about, institutions that control men and things like that. It's left out the fact that all authority comes from God, and this power and authority for government comes from God. It's not I don't arbitrarily just have the right from God to do everything I want to just because I happen to have the biggest guns and the biggest army. There's rules and restrictions and things that come from God. So the flow of force and power from God, and it goes on to such human institutions as the family, the church, the state, government, and we'll focus on that one in particular, and the individuals responsible for ruling others within those structures. To such human institutions as the family, the church, and state, and the individuals responsible for ruling others within those social structures. Why are wives commanded to listen to their... I'm sorry, I answered my own questions. Why do wives listen to their husbands? They're commanded to in the Bible. Right? It's not that God made, this hurts to say, innately superior to women. Right? There's nothing, we're equal in the sight of God as far as our sin nature and other things. But God said the husband is in charge. The authority, I can tell my wife what to do, because God says I'm the husband, and she's supposed to listen to me. It's not that I, had a great big club and pummeled her into submission one day, and she's afraid to resist. That authority comes from God. The same thing in the church. Who gives Pastor Damwin the right to stand up and lead the church? God, right? It comes from God. And the same thing with government. Who gives the Chesterton Police or the Indiana State Police to not let me go 90 miles an hour down 94 to my bus route? I'm going to serve God, and it's for the children. Who gives them that authority? Ultimately, it's God. It comes from God. God tells us to set up these structures and have one man telling other people what to do. All right, and that authority comes from God. So that sort of flow of force and power from God, that's often forgotten. These, especially the home, the church, and the state. God sets up these three institutions, and in particular puts people in charge and tells them how to do things. So the flow of force and power from God to the family, the church, the state, and to the individuals ruling within them. If I don't discipline my children, I'm rebelling against God. I mean, that's His instructions to me as the head of my family. All right, so definition there. I kind of bled over this into this next point already, so maybe you can just continue on. The next point is that there are three biblical institutions that God has set up. They're mentioned in that definition. Three biblical institutions set up. All right, without belaboring the point, can anybody think where in the Bible God sets up or organizes or somehow gives an indication of how the home, the church, or the government is supposed to be run? Where in the Bible are we told that some men have the right in some cases to kill other people? And God says if you don't do it, then the land's going to be polluted. Where do we see this in the Bible where these three institutions are instituted?
I think in Exodus, he breaks it down into the different forms of government, sort of, executive and judicial and such, kind of the different roles.
He does that. We'll get there. That's in one of the major prophets. Talks about the three different branches of government. So we have that from God. What about anybody else? Home or church or state? Yeah.
He instituted capital punishment
Okay, when was that?
in
Genesis?
yeah.
Yeah, that's good enough. Yes, he did. Think about when Cain murdered somebody. He wasn't executed. But later in Genesis, God says, whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall... I butchered it. But anyway, it tells other people to kill that person. All right, and that's from God. If you ever really want to think about something interesting, really think about the Old Testament execution style. Right? If my brother was murdered, then it's my job to hunt down the murderer and kill him. Okay. Even if he makes it to the city of refuge, there'd be a trial, and if they said, well, this guy is guilty of murder, they give him back to me to kill. It kind of changes the whole tone of things. It's not just this, we'll let the justice system execute him. God said, no, it's your job. You hunt them down, and if you don't, then the land is going to be polluted. All right. So anyway, there we have the execution of murderers. All right. There we have God telling other people, if someone commits murder, then it's your job to kill them. All right. Men over men there. Other things. Maybe I'm weird and I lay awake at night thinking about that. I'm probably like you. You probably hope your brother gets murdered. I'm kidding. I like my brother. My sister, though, that's a different story. My sister's Mrs. Armacos, if you don't know that. So, looked like, oh, okay, no, just an unfortunate scratching of the ear. Okay. What about the home?
God set up the first marriage covenant.
Yes, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Especially today, this is especially significant. There's a pattern that should be followed there, Adam and Eve, nothing else. That clerk in, is it Kentucky or Tennessee? I was down there. We need every clerk in the whole country to say, we don't care what the Supreme Court said. It's just an opinion. And if we all ignored it, then they would look as stupid as they really are. I mean, that's just an insane ruling. So even if you're an evolutionist, they say that mutations that can't reproduce are defective and should be done away with. Right? So if you can take evolutionary thought at face value, I mean, we should be striving to get rid of them all to advance evolution. So anyway, it's aggravating. Please cut that out of the video. I'm kidding. All right, we got the home, government. What about the church? When do we see the church being instituted? Where God puts a pastor over other people. Let's narrow it down. Is that in the Old or in the New Testament? New Testament, we see that. So anyway, the point is, God institutes these three institutions. They're from God, and God gives instruction about how they're supposed to operate, gives instructions to the people in charge of them about what they're supposed to do. It's not just, Pastor Damon can't just willy-nilly do anything he wants to with the church and can't say, just shut up, I'm your pastor. God said to listen to me. Right? There's some instruction there, just like at home. I hopefully organize my house along biblical guidelines. All right, I can't just organize it any way I want to. And the same thing applies with government. There are some biblical guidelines and instructions we can look at. God tells us some things about how it should be done. So. All right, the last thing with these three biblical institutions is I just have a couple of conclusions to kind of pull this all together. You might have these written down separately, so if you do that, that's fine. First one I have is God ordained the government. It is something God instituted. God gave it to us. All right, second thing is He's given us responsibility. If my family's a mess, can I yell at God? No, I mean, I've not fulfilled my responsibility in my family. All right? And the same is true for government. God gives us responsibility. I mean, the example we referred to about murderers in the Old Testament. I mean, the individual people had responsibility to fulfill. And if they did not, God talked about the land being polluted. And the same thing carries over today. We have a responsibility, especially in our government structure, until we go full communist. For the time being, we have real responsibility. We get to vote. We can petition our leaders. We can. There's some real effort we can put forth there, and that is our responsibility, not just collectively to mankind, but there's some responsibility to God there because He instituted this thing, and we want to follow it His way. Now you can get way carried away and make government your whole life, and that would be wrong. Just as much as it would be wrong for me to say, I'm going to. This could be me and my family at home, and we'll have church together and never come to church. Right? That would be wrong. So there's a balance here. The government isn't everything. We also have a church and a home where there's some responsibilities. But we do have responsibility in our government. So God has given us some responsibilities in our government. All right, next here. Let's move along. Why should we study government? I just have two things here. Neither one of these is especially profound, I don't think. First of all, God ordained it. I mean, this is something God gave us. We should be aware of what it is, how it's organized, how it works. And then the second point about why we should study it is that we have responsibility in it. We have a role to play. You know, God's not going to accept when I get to heaven if I plead ignorance about the husband being the head of the family. You know, I'm sorry, God, I never got to that part in the Bible. And it's not going to work. We have a responsibility. So we need to make sure we understand what God says about government and its proper job and role and our proper response to leaders. And next semester, if you're here, we'll get it more into talking about when do we not obey our leaders? I mean, is there a time where our obligation to God is first? And there is. And the obligation to the leader second. So we want to make sure we have a proper understanding, because there's a job that we need to fulfill. We're not just, not yet, we might be in time, we're not just people that are strapped into the seats on a, I was thinking Ferris wheel, that's the wrong word, roller coaster, just along for the ride. We can scream and yell, but there's really nothing that we're going to do to affect where the train's going. We're not like that. We have a role to play, all right? And we should then study it so we do that, fulfill that role well. All right. Last thing for today is the biblical purpose of government. What job or jobs does God give the government? We skipped over some other passages because of the heat, but I think we should look up a couple of these. What job or jobs? 1 Peter 2. I'll read it to you, but if you want to look up 1 Peter 2, 13 and 14. We can also get this over in Romans, but we get it here. All right, let's start in verse 13. Submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme, or unto governors as unto them that are sent by him. All right, so it says here, people that are sent by God. It says here, for, and here's the reason why we have governors and kings. For the punishment of evildoers. Okay, that's the first thing on my list. The government's job is to punish evildoers. Crime. I think here it is included people outside the country that want to do evil to us. You know, defense, that type of thing. Punish evildoers. It'd be great if we went back to that being the primary goal of our government, to defend us from evildoers. It would put our president in a very unnatural position, because that's kind of a manly thing to talk about. Okay? And he would be very uncomfortable. Now, his wife. I saw once a picture of them when they changed the faces. And once you got past how strange it looked, it fit. Okay? Her face is the more manly of the two. So, all right, punish evil. All right, that is one job, and I think here the primary job of the government. And then the second job, and for the praise of them that do well. The praise of them that do well. I don't think that the government shouldn't be, have some by advertisement space on the radio, and everybody that gets 100 in government class, they praise you on the radio. Tamar got 100. Good job. Everybody give a round of, not that type of praise. But really, I think the way to think of this is to set up a system where the good can prosper. Right? If you think about a good ref at a soccer game. I don't know if we had that yesterday, but a good ref at a soccer game. He's there to point out when people break the rules. I saw about part of the second half of the game, and I saw Caleb Stockman plow over one of the front line guys on your team. He probably did it multiple times. Right? Caleb, even when he was young and in high school, was slow and plowed over people. Now he's older and slower and plows over them more frequently. But the one time I saw it, the ref called him for a foul. It was outside the penalty box, and you guys got a kick out of it. But his job there is to stop people from breaking the rules. And by doing that, he allows the best team to succeed. Didn't the old timers win? I had to leave before I left.
Yes.
So see there? The best team. I didn't play, so I can't really brag anything this time. But I really do think a sports setting is a good place, a good analogy. The ref there is there to tell people when they broke the rules. And by fairly doing that, he allows the good to succeed, allows the best team to succeed. And I think that's a good analogy, a good way to think of the job our government should have. It's there if I break into the door, I'm into Robert's lockbox, that high-tech security box. Those were very unsafe when I was in the door. I can't imagine they're any better now. Break into that thing and steal all of his gold and silver that just got squirreled away in there. The government's job is to come and punish me for stealing from him. All right. The government's job isn't to make sure my nose is blown and that I go see the doctor and that I feed myself. That's not the government's job. And if you think about what our government does, a whole lot of it is things like that are nowhere near this. Right? Nowhere near this. So, all right. Last comment I have here about the purpose of government is that given here from this verse that the punishment of evildoers is at the heart of the government's job. The more a country is evil, the more the government has to do this, right? And we as a group, as a nation, have gotten more and more evil and come up with new and exciting ways to cheat people and be immoral. So the government is forced then to expand more and more. That doesn't explain all of the expansion of our government, but that is part of it. Just like if, I know none of you would have been the cause of this, but if you were in a high school class or maybe elementary class, if you remember that far, where the class was especially bad and the teacher had to institute some extra rules. Never? What are you talking about? Maybe you didn't notice because every class was like that. You didn't realize it. But no, we've probably been in something like that where there had to be some extra rules and some extra things laid down from the authority. And the same thing here is true for government. The more we're evil and wicked as a group, the more the government has to step in and get involved. So, all right, any questions about that? Tomorrow we'll look at a little bit of history and some of the background to where the ideas in our Constitution. Not tomorrow, Friday. I scared Jim. So, all right, let's leave before we pass out.